Hello and good afternoon and welcome to the Trust Fundraising Hub Live. I am Beth Upton and with me today, I'm so pleased I put my hand in the right direction there, that was a guess, is my colleague Deanna Wolf, who works with me at Money Tree Fundraising. We are available for the next 30 minutes to answer any and all of your questions. We are live across Twitter on @TrustFundraising. Or at Trust Fundraise, I think it is. Actually, I should probably get that right. We're available on Facebook at the Trust Fundraising Hub, which you have to be a member of. We're also streaming live on LinkedIn at the Money Tree Fundraising page. If you have any questions, please write them down underneath wherever you're watching this video live, and we will answer them in due course. Otherwise, we have got some questions that people have sent to us over the course of the month that they weren't able to attend today and have them answered live, and we're going to launch into those. Before I do that, next month will be in the third Thursday of May, and we have a guest with us who is Martha Awajobi of JMB Consulting. She's the woman behind BAME Online Conference, if you are aware of that conference, and if you're not, you should be. And I will be talking to Martha about BAME Online for 2022 and what trust fundraisers can learn from it and why we should all attend. So that's happening then. And then back to Deanna will be hosting in June, always on the third Thursday, always at 12:15 p.m, always for half an hour, always on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. So like I say, if you can join us live, feel free to write questions down below. If you can't join us live, get in touch and we'll add the questions on. Before I start with our first question, I'm just going to do my normal thing of checking our streams to make sure I am live, because I'm slightly paranoid about it, and make sure I can see us and make sure that the questions are coming across okay. 1 second. That's us there. That's fine. Can't see us on Facebook, which is always slightly worrying because that's our core audience. No, there we are. That's absolutely fine. I can see us on, I can see us on all of our platforms. So the first question that came up in the Trust Fundraising Hub on Facebook this month is around recruitment and talking about accessible recruitment practices and how we can change them. And definitely the question that was raised at the time was asking people's experience of sending questions in advance. And I wanted to have a conversation with you, Deanna, today about what is the stuff that people should be doing that's before the questions, because I think that whole questions in advance thing, there's now a growing body of evidence of people saying, gosh, that works really well, and if you can send them a week in advance, and it was certainly discussed on the day, and I don't think I'm putting words in your mouth that you didn't put there first, but I think you were the one who pointed out that, trust fundraisers particularly, we're not testing their ability to think on their feet. We should be testing their core writing and their research and their ability to gather information, none of which needs to be a surprise question on the day. So I feel like that bit of it's been done. I guess I want to talk to you about the application process and what happens in the run-up to interview. I wondered if you had any thoughts on accessible ideas for that.
I think the answers are really important, or the questions are really important up front. I have stage fright, and I get stage fright with anything, including a toddler time, because I used to be a children's librarian, including going and standing in front of thousands of people, including something like this. So I know we've talked about what was going to happen today. It's just knowing what that is means that fear isn't there, which means that I can think, and I've stopped being scared, and I can start thinking. And so while I'm giving you the answers off the top of my head, I'm prepared for them, and I'm in a place where I can actually think about them. Trust fundraising is one of those skills that is a lot of times between you and your computer and a table. And there's enough people who I know are scared to talk on the phone that they write down the script of what they're going to be talking before they go. And I think that's part of the skill set of what makes trust fundraisers really good at our jobs, is that we think about stuff for a long time before we commit to sending it off and putting it in public. So having those questions in advance means that you can think about and be prepared and be calm and sure within yourself. Mm-hmm. But I still think that there is room for that, knowing that there's going to be the odd question that comes out of the blue. But also having those questions in advance means that you're in a better place to answer the question out of the blue.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And definitely the people I've seen. So Matt Smith of Think Consulting's got a big Twitter following, and he's been talking a lot about it. Nikki Bell of Fundraising Everywhere, I've seen talking a lot about it. There's more and more people coming out talking about this. And one of the things that I've seen both Nikki and Matt talk about is that, you know, you have these questions that you send in advance, but they provide this framework for a safe space, and someone gives you the answer, and all you do is go, that's really interesting, let's talk more about that, and you dive in and you get more depth out of all of your answers because people are able to think about it. I was also thinking about how this relates to quite a lot of the campaigns that we've seen coming out of our sector the last year or two, and Show the Salary is the obvious one. So when you are drawing up a job description, write the bloody salary down, frankly, and put it in the advert, and don't be shy about it. I mean, we don't need to talk about commission-based fundraising because, you know, every time that comes up, there's the groundswell of people who squish that down. But also sort of, and there's obviously the non-graduates welcome. I'm a non-graduate. I know you are. I'll put my hand that way. You are a graduate, so you know there's room for both of us in the trust fundraising world. I guess and for me, it's not just graduate, whether you have a degree or not. It's sort of this arbitrary qualification thing. So if you're not asking for a degree, but you think, well, I won't ask for a degree because that's too high a standard. What I'll do is I'll put my A levels in. You know, what about people who grew up in chaotic households, who didn't have standard educations, who come from other countries, who can't evidence their qualifications for whatever reason? You know, actually, I would argue that a written test is a better way of seeing someone's written skills now than an A level or whatever, that, or even a GCSE or an O level or whatever you want to call it, that might have happened 20, 30 years ago. So there is that. And also the other thing I'm seeing, or I'm certainly hearing people talk about when jobs, is memberships as a shorthand for good practice. So if we're not going to ask for a degree, how can we quickly, what is our shorthand in a job description to help us make sure that we're attracting quality candidates? That I'm hearing, I'm not seeing it myself, an increase in requirement for Institute of Fundraising membership, for example. And I guess what I would say about that is that's like 120 quid a year. So if you're doing this for the right reasons, then you should be doing this to increase the pool of candidates for your organisation so that you can get the best possible person. And the truth is that that person, well, given membership numbers at their height were 5,000 and something, compared to God knows how many tens of thousands of fundraisers there are, like very few people have ever been members of the Institute of Fundraising, and it is another cost that you're asking people to bear. And I just, you know, is there a better way? What, for me, it's about going back to first principles. What are the core skills of the person I want to recruit, and how do I best find those out? So I was just thinking about that, and I don't think this particularly happens in our world of trust fundraising. Correct me if I'm wrong, but also like tests. So you hear of people having Myers-Briggs type indicator tests and Melvin tests and things like that at interviews, and I
know I'm in Myers-Briggs, and frankly, I'm a Gemini, so I'm opposites. Depending on the mood I'm in, I'll score entirely differently. I don't think that's good. I do like the idea of continuing professional development. So if you're not entry level, and entry level is an entirely different story. Degree, I've known of somebody, which is why I advocate for a live written exercise in right before or right afterwards, where the person can't get someone else to write it. I know of at least a couple people who have university degrees that say they can write, and the writing examples that I've seen from them are worse than what you'd get from somebody who went to high school or who hadn't been to high school yet.
Yeah.
Grammatically horrible. The thing is that's a core skill for us, is being the ability to write clearly and succinctly, or not always succinctly. Sometimes it's tell the story well. That storytelling skill. So what kinds of things have you done to develop your professional ability to do things. And it's that continuing professional development. It doesn't have to be formal education. It could be that you've taken a storytelling course. It could be that you are a storyteller, or that you write novels or whatever. But it's about having that there. And I think having that is important. Membership in a professional organization, I'm an advocate of it, but I'm an advocate of it when it's worthwhile and when it's useful and when it's affordable. And if it's not affordable, it's easy enough to say, I can't afford it. And if I'm not going to get a job because I can't afford a professional membership, that's a really rotten reason to not get a job. And I'd be questioning that employer. Why is that a requirement? And if that's the requirement, then why aren't you paying for them?
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? And something you just said now is actually going to spark me onto one of our next questions, which is you talked about storytelling. So one of the questions that's come up in the hub this month is someone who's obviously lost a bit of their vavavoom, and the question is around, how do you reinvigorate your love for trust fundraising? So trust fundraisers, it doesn't innovate, it doesn't change, it's this kind of steady eddy, the pool of trusts doesn't exponentially change every year, so the market size doesn't change, the volume of competition may go up exponentially year on year, as we're seeing no less this year than any other year. But the core skill of what is successful doesn't change, it doesn't innovate. I mean, you and I talk a lot about how that leads to it not getting a lot of attention in the conferences. Want to just focus on the new and the exciting and the innovative, and so therefore trust fundraising is perhaps seen as dull, perhaps seen as boring, and then that can rub off on us, right? We don't want to be thought of as dull and boring, when actually for an awful lot of organizations, their trust fundraisers are the people bringing in the most money and the most reliable money, right? And planned in advance, because you're winning money today to something you can spend in 6 months or so.
And often you're the ones that are getting the least amount of support and training.
Yeah, smallest training budgets, because what do you need training in? You know how to do your job, blah, blah, blah. And I was just struck by your comment about storytelling and storytelling workshops. And certainly that has really worked for me in the past in terms of changing how I write, is going and doing something completely unrelated to trust fundraising and doing creative writing courses. And I did, you can just about see it behind me, you can't really see what it is, my philanthropic psychology course with the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy, and thinking through how we can use the psychology of love to connect our donors in the written work we do has been some of the most invigorating work I've done for my own brain in recent years. And I went into that course assuming that would be for my major donor brain, but actually the vast majority of what I've implemented has been in cases for support, which is majoritively trusts. What are some of the things you do to keep yourself invigorated?
I was the special interest group chair up here in Scotland for a long time. And so that seeing other trust fundraisers on a regular basis, up here we had regular quarterly meetings, in-person meetings before the world kind of turned upside down. And then it went to online meetings, and you could see people's faces and it would be interesting. And so on the sides, it's like, oh, hi, how are you? So it's that connection, the personal connection with other fundraisers was always a really good thing for me. I do have a set of friends who are trust fundraisers as opposed to just my regular friends. They are regular friends as well, but they're trust fundraisers. And when we get together, we talk about the profession of what we're doing. We're not necessarily talking business, but we're talking about the things that we do the majority of the hours that we're awake and at work. And I think that helps in keeping into it. And I've taken a storytelling course, and I have to say that I'm not the best verbal storyteller. I like reading stories. I did story time and toddler time for lots of years to 4 and 5 year olds. And I love that. And I love stories. I don't tell them very well. I write them really well and I read them really well. And so having that there helps, and watching things, actually posting up. I love it when people post on the hub about the fact that they got an award. Someone posted last night that it was the first award they ever got. And that's when you need to jump up and down and do happy dances. And it's about being silly, and it's about forcing other people to acknowledge the fact that you've got a big grant in. I want to say forcing's not the best word, but being vocal about it and being out there. Don't just hide away as a trust fundraiser, sort of force yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit and interact with other trust fundraisers, even if it's just virtually. That and reading stories. And then, I don't know, I've been doing this for 20 years. So for me, I go to conferences as well when there's a conference on, even if it's online, and taking advantage of anything like that, because all of a sudden something will twig and I go, it is possible. It's a hard climb. And sometimes that mountain is inverse. You're climbing up feeling like you're going to fall off at any given moment. But knowing that there's other people out there helps, and doing the same thing. And we're all at that coal face.
Yeah.
Also knowing my beneficiaries. So I know a lot of people, I've worked often in organizations where the people I support, I'm helping and raising money to help support, are 2 or 3 arm lengths away from me, and it's difficult for me to get to them. But if there's a way to get back in and see the resources and see what you're looking to raise money for, that reinvigorates your sense of purpose and that drive.
Yeah, and the beneficiary thing is also really interesting to me, because I think particularly in smaller organizations that trust fundraisers, and I think it's probably more true of trust fundraisers in large organizations than it is of other disciplines as well, can be very instrumental in helping to formulate projects, because it is only through the discipline of having to write the project plan for the application that service delivery teams have to go through that process. Otherwise they can be quite iterative. And actually, whilst we talk about the fact that there's no innovation and it's business as usual, the world of how we engage with our beneficiaries, whether we are beneficiary led, whether that is the right thing to do, the use of case studies, respect, has changed. You know, when I started out 20 years ago, case studies were these sort of transactional things that were just used to help raise money. And we don't think like that anymore, thank goodness. We now recognize that there are people behind those stories, and that there are complex and intersectional reasons why people are in situations that they require or desire support from, whatever the charity is, you know. And so actually, conferences that help us as trust fundraisers think about the best way to treat the people at the end result of that grant is really useful. And just a kind of like a plug for the BAME online, which Martha's going to be talking about next month. Before Martha came up with this idea of there being a space for and by and about Black and minority ethnic people in fundraising and doing fundraising, and it just hadn't crossed a lot of our minds, because you're white and I'm white, just to kind of state the obvious. It just
glowingly so, fluorescently so.
And then there was another huge kind of wave of realization at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, when the trusts all stepped up to give grants, but disproportionately at the beginning were shown to not be giving grants to organizations that were led by the beneficiary groups, and particularly people of color. So I think there is an awful lot for us to learn. There's some stuff around our privilege, there's some stuff around historically where we've come from, that we need to be modest enough to realize that we're just because it's what we've always done doesn't make it right, and we need to step back and learn it. And I think that certainly beginning to kind of scratch away at the surface of that stuff has reinvigorated some of my practice, because it's given me a totally different lens to think about what is my role in supporting organizations to do excellent fundraising, which is what we do for a living, and making sure that we're doing that in as broad a way as possible, and helping the right people in the right ways.
One of the things that I found is that's not so much of an issue for me. I think because I'm an immigrant as well, I'm Canadian. So I've had to learn how to be me in a different place with different rules and different contexts. And they're very subtly different, because Canada and Scotland are very similar. But there are some really massive differences. And I think one of the things that's interesting for me from fundraising point of view and trust fundraising is I'll go into a session, and if I'm at a conference, I will go and listen to a session that has nothing to do with my area of fundraising, but has a result that I might want to achieve. And then it's forcing me to make the translations and pull the information out and go to, because I use food metaphors everywhere, go to the fridge and see what's inside and make a meal out of it. And so that forcing myself to try a new way of doing it, even though the process hasn't really changed very much. You're right. The ingredients have a little bit, and but it's forcing yourself to try something different. And if that's scary, it's a little step. We don't have to take big steps. We can take little steps, and that can get it big time. And then, the other one that I find really good is I go back and look at my list. I make a list of all the trusts all the wins I've ever had, and I keep a running list of them. And I keep a running list of everything I've ever applied for, and the wins and the losses, and the wins are winning. And I look back over my last 20 years of doing this, and I kind of go, man, I've actually done some really amazing things. And that alone just gives me the confidence that, so maybe the last 20 applications have gotten nowhere, but that's been consistent for everybody. But before that, the 20 applications before that, I got every single one. And I'm exaggerating numbers here to a certain extent, at least the winning every single one. But I think looking back on your CV, looking back at what you've accomplished, that can sometimes reinvigorate you for that.
Yeah, there's definitely something about the road travelled that, especially when you feel like there's at least the same again in front of you, but just looking back and seeing where you've come from can be really useful. So the final question we've been sent in advance, and I just want to remind people, if you're watching live, you are welcome to drop a question in the comments below the video, wherever it is you're watching it. And if you're watching this on repeat, because we put it out across the socials afterwards and we host it on our YouTube channel, and you think, gosh, I really wish I'd submitted a question, then put a comment below and we will, we'll add your question in for next month's one and we'll make sure they're answered. So the last question we've been sent is, where do you start? It was a very big question. So new charity, new person, new to fundraising, has ended up knowing that trusts might be the answer, but then and what's your kind of, we've got to be quick. We've got just over 5 minutes. So in a couple of minutes, bullet points, what's your top advice for someone in that situation?
What do you need the money for, and why is it important? And my organization needing the money is not the answer. That's not what it is. What is your organization going to do? Because you're the facilitator, not the end user or end recipient. So what do you need and why? Who are you going to go to? So get a case for support, or at least a really clear sense of what you want the money for and why is it important, and then go through and find every single funder who funds in that area and long list it in the first instance, and then start shortlisting when you get the applications. Applications are like a lot of things, it's the tip of the iceberg, but all the work happens underwater. It's the bottom main bit of the iceberg is the preparation. This is a front end loaded industry or section income stream. And so get all of your information, organize it, figure out what you want to do, and then going through it. It's going to be a tough road. It's going to be long. Know that in advance. But if you've got it and you know your plan, you can just keep going along and you can pace yourself. And you know that eventually you're going to get where you're going to go because you've got all the things together. You've got your sandwiches, you've got your snacks, you've got your coffee, and you've got your card to get coffee at the services on the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with you. And so I'm just trying to think, if there's some jargon in that, and there might be. So a case for support, tell someone who's never been in fundraising what a case for support might be.
It is a document. It's a written piece of work that has all of the information about your project. You don't send that out. Some people will say it's a case for support is what you send out. And in some cases, you've got a really well-formatted version of it for a particular project, but you don't send your case for support out. Your case for support is your internal Bible. It's got all the information, including the hidden skeletons, so you know where they are in advance. You update it. It's a living document, but keep version control. So you know, this is the version we used last week. This is the version we're using this month. And it tells you everything you want to know, from budget to purpose to outcomes to objectives to all the elements that you would want and that a funder would want to do. And then you use that as the main source of information for any project or any service or your organization. which means that you're not telling the same story too differently to different funders, which means that you have to do lots of extra pieces of work. You're saying the same story to everyone, although you might use different words.
Yeah, and I think, that's the thing, is that you might use different words in the application, but you need to keep the core purpose. And that goes back to what you said at the beginning of this, which is around why are you doing what you do? So, this isn't about paying for a member of staff and paying for their DBS check and some software, although that might be what the grant covers. Why do you need that member of staff with that job description, with that piece of software, and why do they need to be DBS checked? What is their purpose, rather than necessarily what are the tasks on their job description? And I guess for me, it's kind of it's chunking. You can either chunk down or chunk up. I'm going to do chunking down today. If you start with your impact, how is the world going to be different as a result of that? What are your outcomes? What are your outputs? What are your activities? And you can start with activities, but you mustn't finish with activities. So the activities might be that this person will host a drop-in centre 3 times a week in these different locations, because these locations have been identified. What is the output of those drop-in centres? The output would be a number of people seen. Outputs are very measurable. A number of people of maybe some key demographics who've been seen a number of times or whatever. The outcomes is the difference that makes to those people as individuals. Outcomes tends to be about the people who interact with, but the impact is bigger and is more societal, and that can be really hard to wrap your head around. I definitely agree with you that it's worth kind of going and doing that thinking about it. The other thing
the fundraisers shouldn't be coming up with the outcomes and the outputs.
Well, in particular
you can translate it.
The fundraiser is also the founder. So I think when you're really, really starting out, you're actually all of the things, but that's about your different hats that you wear. Absolutely. In an organization where you have people who are driving forward the organization strategy, they should be helping to work out what that impact that stuff is. We've had a comment, so great conversation, thanks. This is from Facebook user. Sorry, it doesn't draw across your name. I hate to be impersonal. Also, add your budget has to be super clear. Yes. How many small charities don't have clear budget, which explains exactly what the grant is going to pay for? Absolutely. And that actually did come up this month, and I wasn't gonna talk about it because someone had said, a grant officer has asked for granular detail, and I don't want to send them our whole budget. Well, I'd kind of go, well, if they want granular detail, send them your whole budget. Like, if that's the level of detail they want, then that's the level of detail they have. And I've got a real sanguine story for you from my early days of Trust Fundraising. I was doing, it was a government grant. They don't exist anymore. It was a health grant. And I rounded to the nearest pound. And we didn't get awarded the grant because I'd rounded.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was a very difficult lesson. Yeah. And it was like
I've not gotten a grant because my margins were too, I didn't have the right spacing, and my margins were the wrong spacing from what they had given in the guidelines. And sometimes when you've got thousands of people applying, those instructions and having that information is what if you can't follow the instructions at the beginning, are you going to follow the instructions when you get the money at the end?
And also, I always think of those poor grant administrators who work super part-time. They might even be volunteers, or they're doing it on top of loads of other stuff. And actually, they're getting thousands of applications for every one grant. And what they're looking for is easy ways to weed that into a smaller number. So if you have ignored the instructions about not sending a DVD, I realise that's very out-of-date tech and it ages me. But this is what was happening at the beginning of my career, is people would ignore instructions not to send bump. So you'd instantly go in the bin because you just can't accept an instruction if you haven't done it in the right font. Like, it might feel like a silly thing, and if you halve the font a little bit, 11.5 instead of 12, then you're going to get more on your page. But if them's the rules, then them's the rules, and you've kind of got to go with it. But there was one more thing you said just before we close, because we are on time, which was around long listing your research, which I thought was brilliant, because I think the question is, how do I research? And I think we're just going to do 3 top line tips because we are out of time. My top tip is who else is doing similar work with similar beneficiaries or similar geography that you can look at who they're getting their grants from. That's the first one, your competitor analysis and your not necessarily competitors, but your local organisations to you or things that are in the same wheelhouse. Look and do that. That's my top tip. Or where would you go?
My top tip would be get some really good keywords and know the sector that you're in and know the keywords that are there and understanding what something means. So that if it's like conservation and preservation, they're sometimes used interchangeably, but one is about conserving buildings and the other one's about plants. Yeah. And so be really clear about that and know exactly what you're doing so that when you go through, you're just pulling in everything at the moment. You're getting 15 pairs of jeans. They're all the same size. And then you've got to try them on and find out that none of them are the same size.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I would also say, come and join us on the Trust Fundraising Hub on LinkedIn, Trust Fundraising Hub, or on Facebook, Trust Fundraising Hub, or follow us on Twitter at Trust Fundraise and ask. There isn't often, Twitter is a difficult one for having a conversation, but definitely on LinkedIn and Facebook, you're in a group with other professional trust fundraisers, and you're welcome to join that group and say, I am raising money for this minibus in this geographic area. Can anyone give me a steer? And there will always be some people who will help you and give you some tips for free, and get people to see if people will read your case for support, and there's an awful lot of willingness to support people and do stuff for free. So I think just, join the groups and don't be afraid to ask, because we just everyone on there wants to make sure everyone's doing a great job. Yeah. Deanna, thank you for joining me today. It's been much easier doing this in conversation than it is doing it as a monologue, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I want to say thank you to everyone who sent their questions in advance, and thank you to Facebook user, I wish I knew your name, for adding that comment to our conversation just now. Next live will be Thursday the 19th of May at 12:15 p.m. So Thursday, the 19th of May, 12:15 p.m. Again, that will be live across Twitter and across Facebook and across LinkedIn. So come and join us on the Trust Fundraising Hub on Facebook, or on it's the Money Tree Fundraising page on LinkedIn, because we can't do a live stream on a group, which is annoying. LinkedIn needs to change that, or on @Trust Fundraise on Twitter. This recording will be shared next week, and all of the back recordings are available on our YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube and search for Money Tree Fundraising, and you can see those there. Like I say, either come and join us live and ask your questions to us live, and don't give us any warning, and we will practice the art of being unprepared, even though we started this chat about how trust fundraisers prefer to be prepared. But whether you can join us live or not, if you have a question you want us to answer, then drop it in over the month and we will do our best to answer it. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.